haven't, punched them in the face or been really ugly with them or anything like that. And they're like bursting out in anger.
Yeah.
It's an experience that they've had in the past that they're drawing forward to that current situation. And it's like, okay, well, they've been hurt in the past.
Yeah.
Families are supposed to be the safest place in the world, the one group of people you can lean on no matter what. But what happens when that same family you trusted suddenly looks completely different once the cameras are rolling? When the world sees not just the polished smiles but the raw fractures, the cracks you once tried so hard to hide. That's what makes the story of the Plaths so gripping and also so heartbreaking. Because when television entered their lives, it didn't just record the day-to-day, it exposed loyalties, betrayals, and the true character of people who were once considered unshakable. Hi friends, my name is Sophie and welcome back to Reality Scandals Daily. If you're new here, don't forget to hit subscribe, give this video a like, and let me know your thoughts in the comments, because I truly want to hear what you think about what we're about to discuss. Now, the reason this story hits so hard is because the Plath family was introduced to us as almost picture perfect. Kim and Barry's kids were homeschooled, sheltered from modern culture, raised on strict rules about faith, music, clothing, and friendships. The series Welcome to Plathville was supposed to showcase this big, loving, united family that looked different from the world but was deeply bonded to each other. For a while, that's what viewers saw, a family presented as wholesome, grounded, and in sync with their values. But then came the turning point. The more episodes aired, the more real-life pressures started surfacing. The kids began to grow up, question the rules, and carve out their own lives. Suddenly, the unity that once defined the Plaths started looking fragile. And as those cracks widened, the cameras captured every strained conversation, every tense dinner, every tearful goodbye. What shocked so many fans was not just the conflict itself, but how different some family members appeared when pushed into the spotlight. On screen, we began to see sides of people that didn't match the image they had carefully built. Arguments about freedom, about loyalty, about who was right and who was wrong, revealed that even within a faith-centered home, trust was not guaranteed. And this is where the heartbreak really sets in. Because it's one thing to disagree with a parent or a sibling behind closed doors, that's private. But when those disagreements become national television, suddenly the mask slips. Suddenly, you find yourself realizing that the person you thought you could always lean on might not actually be that person anymore. It's that painful moment of recognition, that feeling Lydia herself has spoken about, where you realize that someone you thought was trustworthy, someone you thought would always be on your side, shows you a completely different face when the pressure is on. So the question we're asking today is simple but devastating. What happens when reality TV forces family fractures out into the open, and the people you thought you could trust reveal a side you never expected? That's exactly what we'll be breaking down, and by the end of this video, you'll see just how deeply this exposure changed the Plaths forever. When Welcome to Plathville first aired, the image was clear. Kim and Barry Plath were raising their 9 children in a carefully structured, almost idyllic way. No smartphones, no sugar, no pop culture, no outside influences that could, in their view, corrupt innocence. They were presented as this ultra-tight-knit family where love, faith, and discipline went hand in hand. On screen, their life looked like something out of another world. Acres of land, barefoot kids running through the fields, and a household that seemed sheltered from the chaos of modern society. For many viewers, the Plaths were fascinating because they were so different. The purity culture they practiced, the homeschooling, the music restrictions, the ban on television and internet, all of it painted a portrait of a family determined to hold on to values that much of the world had long abandoned. Kim especially came across as the driving force, shaping her children's every choice, guiding their steps as though she could shield them from every outside influence. Barry, quiet and reserved, supported her approach, and together they seemed united in this mission.
Much accused Olivia stealing her music. I'm just trying to get a little bit of closure on some of those topics.
Reality has a way of sneaking in, even into the most sheltered homes.
As I'm walking up the hill to talk with Ethan, I can tell that he's frustrated.
The cracks in that perfect image became impossible to ignore. The Plath children weren't just characters in their parents' carefully crafted story anymore. They were young adults with voices, frustrations, and a burning need for independence. That's when the show shifted from being a portrait of unity to a chronicle of fracture. Take Moriah, for example. Early on, she was painted as the rebellious daughter, colorful clothes, bold makeup, and open desire to experience the world beyond the Plath farm. She openly clashed with her mother's restrictions, and viewers saw those tensions play out again and again. But here's where the editing framed her in a very particular light. In some episodes, she was shown as defiant, difficult, even dramatic, the one stirring up trouble. Yet anyone paying attention could also see a young woman simply asking for freedom, for the right to grow into her own person. Her tears, her anger, her joy at small victories like choosing her own outfits or writing her music told a deeper story than just rebellion. It was the story of a daughter trying to breathe under a roof that didn't allow much air. Then there's Ethan, the eldest son, who carried perhaps the heaviest burden. Married to Olivia, Ethan found himself torn between loyalty to his wife and loyalty to his parents. The show highlighted this constant tug-of-war, awkward family dinners, explosive confrontations, and moments where Ethan seemed paralyzed by the choice he was being forced to make. Olivia, in particular, became a lightning rod. To Kim and Barry, she represented the outside world they feared, the one who was changing Ethan, pulling him away from family traditions. To viewers, Olivia was simply a young woman standing firm in her boundaries, unwilling to be swallowed into a system she didn't believe in. Those episodes where Olivia and Kim went head-to-head were some of the most dramatic in the entire series. Editing emphasized the tension, the cutting remarks, the tears, but what many fans pointed out was that so much of the deeper context, the years of built-up frustration, was only hinted at. The show gave us the explosions, but not always the quiet, thoughtful conversations in between. That gap left many viewers with questions: who was really in the wrong, and how much of this was just selective storytelling for ratings. And then there's Micah, who took a completely different route. As he pursued modeling and moved away from the family's restrictions, the editing often painted him as the golden boy breaking free. Shots of him on photo shoots, exploring new friendships, and enjoying freedoms he never had at home contrasted sharply with the scenes of Kim and Barry's rules. Micah's story showed how different siblings could respond to the same upbringing. Some crumbled under the weight of control, while others soared once the rules were lifted. But here's the critical thing: on screen, all of these storylines were chopped, cut, and rearranged into arcs that fit neatly into episodes. The purity culture was shown, the family rules were highlighted, and the drama was teased out for maximum effect. What we didn't always see were the full conversations, the in-between moments, the explanations that gave context. Lydia herself has said that some of her deeper, more thoughtful reflections were never aired. Instead, producers leaned into the sound bites that would keep audiences glued to the screen. And that's where the contrast becomes stark. The Plath family off-screen is far more complicated than the family we see in edited episodes. In real life, arguments didn't start and end in neatly timed 40-minute blocks. Hurt feelings lingered. Trust was broken slowly, sometimes silently, before it finally cracked wide open. What the cameras gave us was a polished version of those cracks, dramatic, yes, but not always complete. So when we think about the perfect image of Kim and Barry's family, the strict rules, the claims of unity, the smiling family photos, and then compare it with the fights, the separations, the strained phone calls we saw on the show, It's clear that television didn't create the fractures. It simply put them on display for the whole world to see. And once those fractures were public, there was no going back to the picture-perfect family we met in season 1. Lydia Plath has always been presented to Welcome to Plathville viewers as the good daughter. While Moriah pushed boundaries and Ethan walked away in anger, Lydia was the one who seemed to stay tethered to Kim and Barry's original vision. She was the girl who dutifully cooked, cleaned, and prayed. She was the daughter who rarely raised her voice and who often defended her parents when others didn't. On screen, Lydia was positioned almost as a counterbalance, proof that not all the Plath children rejected their upbringing. One of the strongest symbols of Lydia's obedience and faith was her prayer closet. Viewers remember the scenes where Lydia would retreat into that tiny, intimate space to pray, journal, and pour out her emotions to God. The way the show framed those moments, Lydia's prayer closet wasn't just a room, it was a sanctuary, a visible reminder of her dedication to faith and family. To audiences, it made her seem almost saint-like, someone untouched by the rebellion, conflict, and questioning swirling around her siblings. But here's the reality that becomes clear when you listen closely. Lydia's faith was sincere, but it was also a lifeline. That closet wasn't just about devotion, it was where she processed pain, confusion, and loneliness. She was carrying the emotional weight of being the obedient one, the sibling who felt she had to keep the family together while everyone else seemed to be pulling away. And that role, as comforting as it may have seemed on screen, was also a cage. For example, Lydia often spoke about praying for her siblings who had left the family home. Those moments were edited to highlight her unwavering faith, but what didn't get the same airtime was the underlying heartbreak. The sadness of watching people she loved walk away, and the subtle fear that maybe, just maybe, they were right to do so. Her tears weren't only about loyalty to her parents, they were about confusion. If her siblings were experiencing freedom, happiness, and self-expression outside the rigid system she still clung to, what did that say about the rules she was following? This is where the spotlight made everything harder. In private, most families can navigate conflict in their own time, with the option to cover up or ignore uncomfortable truths. But Lydia's struggles were magnified by television. The world was watching her every prayer, her every word of devotion, and her every reaction to family drama. She wasn't just a daughter anymore, she was a symbol, and symbols don't get to change their minds. The competitor's script theme, that fractures became amplified once under the spotlight, fits Lydia's story perfectly. Because while Ethan and Olivia's marital clashes were explosive and Moriah's rebellion was obvious, Lydia's fracture was quieter. She wasn't yelling at her parents or storming out of the house. Her fracture came in the form of doubt, sadness, and the unbearable pressure of carrying an image that wasn't entirely her own. In one emotional moment on the show, Lydia admitted she felt overwhelmed by the tension in the family. She spoke about how hard it was when people she thought she knew showed different sides under stress. That admission was telling. It revealed that Lydia wasn't as untouched or perfectly obedient as the edited narrative suggested. She was human, shocked by the cracks in her family's foundation, and unsure of how to hold all of it together. Think about the weight of that, being a teenager, then a young adult, placed in front of cameras while your family unravels in real time. Having producers highlight your most vulnerable moments of prayer and grief, then package them as part of a larger character arc. Being known to millions of strangers not as yourself, but as the obedient one, the faithful one, the good daughter. That kind of pressure doesn't just shape how the world sees you, it shapes how you see yourself. And here's the heartbreaking part. Lydia herself never asked to be the perfect Plath child. That role was given to her. It was useful for the storyline, it balanced the chaos, and it gave audiences a figure to root for. But the cracks were visible if you looked closely. The moments when her voice trembled, when her eyes brimmed with tears, when her words revealed longing for peace she couldn't seem to find. The longer the show went on, the more difficult it became for Lydia to reconcile the two sides of her identity. The girl who wanted to remain faithful and supportive, and the young woman quietly questioning why everything had to hurt so much. Her obedience didn't shield her from pain. If anything, it deepened her loneliness because she couldn't so easily cast off her role the way some of her siblings could. By the time later seasons aired, viewers were split. Some saw Lydia as a beacon of unwavering faith. Others felt compassion, recognizing the toll it must have taken to live in that role, to carry the burden of being the glue in a family that was already breaking apart. And both views were true. Lydia was both strong in her convictions and fragile under the pressure. She was both faithful and fearful. In the end, Lydia's story highlights the very heart of what reality TV does to family fractures. Conflict that might have stayed hidden in private became magnified and broadcast, forcing Lydia to confront not only her parents' control and her siblings' rebellion but also her own heart. Her prayer closet was not just a symbol of obedience, it was a survival mechanism, a place where she could cry, plead, and ask questions she didn't feel safe voicing aloud. And as much as the cameras shaped her into the obedient daughter, Lydia herself told the deeper truth. She was just as confused, just as heartbroken, and just as human as the rest of them. Trust is the foundation of any family. But on Welcome to Plathville, trust wasn't just tested behind closed doors, it was tested in front of cameras, edited into episodes, and consumed by millions. And when trust broke down, it didn't just fracture bonds, it became a storyline. One of the clearest examples came with Ethan and Olivia. From the moment their marriage was introduced on the show, it was obvious their dynamic with Kim and Barry was shaky. Ethan wanted his wife to feel comfortable around his family. Olivia wanted boundaries, healthy ones, that gave her space from the strict rules and constant judgment she felt from her in-laws. But Kim and Barry saw Olivia as a threat, someone pulling their eldest son away from the traditions and authority they had always maintained. Viewers remember those tense family dinners where smiles were forced, voices cracked, and conversations spiraled into hostility. Editing often lingered on Ethan's silence, the way he froze, his eyes downcast, trapped between defending his wife and respecting his parents. Olivia, however, wasn't silent. She called things out. She set boundaries, and each time she did, Kim and Barry seemed to tighten their grip even more, making Ethan's life almost unbearable. The betrayal here wasn't just between Ethan and his parents, it was the betrayal of a son who realized his loyalty was being used as leverage. Ethan trusted his parents to love and respect his marriage. Instead, he felt they undermined it. And Olivia, for her part, trusted Ethan to stand up for her, only to find him wavering under the crushing weight of divided loyalty. Moriah's confrontations added another layer. She trusted her parents to let her grow, to love her as she was, not just as who they wanted her to be. But time and again, her desire for freedom, whether it was clothes, makeup, music, or relationships, was met with resistance. Those tearful scenes of Moriah pleading for understanding weren't just teenage drama, they were the visible marks of betrayal. Betrayal of a daughter who believed her parents' love should mean acceptance, not control. One unforgettable confrontation showed Moriah breaking down, declaring that she couldn't live under her parents' rules anymore. The episode framed it as rebellion, but at its core, it was heartbreak. She wasn't storming off because she hated them. She was storming off because she loved them and couldn't reconcile that love with the suffocating expectations placed on her. That realization, that the people she should trust most might never truly see her, left scars. But siblings, too, wrestled with loyalty.
Watched accused Lydia stealing her music. I'm just trying to get a little bit of closure on some of those topics.
But even between siblings, there were moments of strain.
As I'm walking up the hill to talk with Ethan, I can tell that he's frustrated.
Created rifts. Lydia's closeness to Kim, meanwhile, sometimes left the others feeling like she wasn't on their side. It was a tug-of-war of loyalty, with every child forced to choose between parents, siblings, or themselves. And then there was Lydia's quiet reflection, the one line that still echoes for so many fans: "It hurts to realize who you can't trust anymore." That sentence wasn't delivered with screaming or slamming doors. It was whispered, almost mournful. And it cut deeper than all the loud confrontations combined. Because Lydia represented the heart of the family's trust, she was the one who wanted everyone together, the one who prayed for healing, the one who believed in reconciliation. For her to admit that even she couldn't trust everyone anymore showed just how far the fractures had spread. It wasn't just about Moriah wanting freedom, or Ethan protecting Olivia, or Micah leaving the farm. It was about a fundamental loss of safety within the family itself. When Lydia felt betrayed, it meant the emotional center of the Plath household had collapsed. Comparing her reflections with what fans saw on the show reveals the gap between reality and reality TV. Episodes gave us the explosive moments: Ethan walking out, Olivia clashing with Kim, Moriah sobbing in frustration. They gave us Lydia's prayer closet scenes, her words of hope, her tears. But what fans didn't always get was the slow build-up, the quiet, lingering distrust that doesn't fit neatly into a 42-minute episode. For example, when Ethan cut off contact with his parents, the show portrayed it as a sudden break, a shocking moment of finality. But Lydia's comments later revealed it wasn't sudden at all. It was months of tension, months of small betrayals stacking up until there was no trust left to rebuild. The editing showed the explosion. Lydia's words reminded us of the erosion that led there. The same goes for Moriah. On screen, her rebellions looked dramatic, even impulsive. But Lydia's reflection that it hurt to see people show sides she didn't expect pointed to something deeper. Moriah wasn't just rebelling. She was revealing the cracks that had been hidden under a surface of family unity. And those cracks weren't just hers to bear, they rippled out to every sibling. Fans also noticed that while Lydia's loyalty to her parents was emphasized on the show, her sadness about the fractures often got less screen time. Editing leaned into her role as the obedient, faithful daughter. But her moments of confusion, her questions, her quiet heartbreak, those were often cut short. Viewers got a glimpse, but not the full weight of what it meant for Lydia to feel betrayed by her own family narrative. The result was a layered picture: on-screen explosions of trust breaking down, and off-screen admissions of deeper betrayal. Together they told the story of a family unraveling not just because of outside pressures, but because of what happens when trust is no longer mutual. And that's the tragedy of Welcome to Plathville. Once trust was broken, there was no easy way back. Ethan and Olivia couldn't unhear Kim's accusations. Moriah couldn't unfeel the rejection of her choices. Micah couldn't unsee the freedoms he had found outside the family bubble, and Lydia couldn't unknow the painful truth that sometimes the people you love most are the very people you can't rely on. For viewers, it was compelling television. For the Plaths, it was betrayal turned into entertainment. And for Lydia, it was the shattering of the one belief she held dearest, that family could always be trusted. When we watch Welcome to Plathville, it's easy to forget that what we see isn't the whole truth. It's the truth filtered through cameras, producers, and editors who make choices about what ends up in the final cut. Every soundbite, every tearful moment, every explosive fight, they all pass through someone else's hands before we get to witness them. And that's where things get complicated. Because the Plath family's struggles weren't just lived in real time, they were shaped into television. Take Moriah's fights, for example. Time and again, the show leaned into her moments of rebellion, the screaming, the slammed doors, the crying. Those were powerful images. They made for dramatic TV. But if you watched closely, you could sense that what we were getting was only part of the picture. The build-up to those confrontations, the quieter conversations where Moriah tried to explain her feelings, were often missing. The editing framed her as the dramatic, emotional daughter, when really she was just desperately trying to be understood. The same was true for Ethan and Olivia. Their marriage struggles were one of the most compelling storylines across multiple seasons, but think about how the show presented them. Episodes gave us the big blow-ups, the arguments about boundaries, the decision to cut off contact with Ethan's parents, the icy stares across the dinner table. But where was the deeper context? Where were the long, difficult talks between husband and wife about what it meant to be loyal to each other in the middle of family chaos? Olivia has spoken publicly about how much more there was behind those scenes, and Lydia herself echoed that frustration. The words that mattered most to her, the words filled with thought and faith, often didn't make the cut. That's the painful part for Lydia. She opened her heart on camera, she prayed, she reflected, she tried to put words to the heartbreak of seeing her family divided. Yet when those episodes aired, so much of what she had shared was missing. Producers leaned on the sound bites, the short clips that could be easily framed for drama, instead of the deeper truths. Imagine bearing your soul, only to find that your story has been condensed to a single line or a single tear, stripped of the nuance that gave it meaning. And we as viewers feel the gap. We know when something doesn't add up. We can sense when a fight has been cut down to make it look more explosive than it really was. We can feel when someone's words have been taken out of context. That's why so many fans of Welcome to Plathville have debated endlessly online, not just about who's right or wrong, but about whether we're even getting the full story. Producers know what they're doing. They know that drama sells. They know that lingering on a shot of Olivia walking out the door, or Moriah storming off, or Ethan shutting down, will keep us glued to the screen. But what they don't show, the hours of conversation, the attempts to heal, the moments of love that still exist, those are just as real. And Lydia's complaint about not seeing her deeper words on screen shines a light on that reality. Think back to the scenes in Lydia's prayer closet. On television they were powerful, but they were edited to highlight her loyalty, her role as the good daughter who prayed for unity. What got left out were the doubts, the confusion, the raw emotions that didn't fit that narrative. She admitted later that what she really said in those moments went beyond the neat, polished clips viewers saw. She wrestled with questions of trust, heartbreak, and betrayal. She felt torn between her parents and her siblings. But the show often chose the safer version of Lydia, the version that reinforced the Plath image, even as that image was crumbling. Ethan and Olivia's story suffered the same treatment. Episodes emphasized Olivia's assertiveness and Ethan's silence, but what about the middle ground? What about the ways they tried to work together? To compromise, to find common ground in the chaos. The editing framed Olivia as the force pulling Ethan away from his family, but skipped over the fact that she often encouraged him to reconcile when possible. Fans who follow Olivia outside the show know that she has shared longer reflections, filled with nuance, that simply never made it into an episode. And then there's Moriah. Her independence journey was shown as dramatic breaks, dyeing her hair, moving out, clashing with her parents. But rarely did we get to see the quieter side of her growth. The moments of reflection, the small steps toward healing, the private talks with siblings where she showed vulnerability. Those moments existed, but they didn't make good TV, so they stayed on the cutting room floor. This selective editing is what makes Lydia's perspective so heartbreaking. She wasn't naive about how television worked, but she was honest. She thought that if she spoke her heart, those words would matter. Instead, she watched as the most meaningful things she said were cut down to sound bites that fit someone else's storyline. That's why she later spoke about how the show revealed sides of people she didn't expect. It wasn't just her family's actions, it was the way their words and lives were presented, sometimes in ways that even they didn't recognize. And the audience? We were left piecing together fragments. We debated in comment sections, we speculated on social media, we tried to connect the dots between what we saw on screen and what we sensed was happening off screen. Fans picked up on the inconsistencies. The way someone's mood would change abruptly between scenes, the way a storyline would suddenly escalate without explanation. Those weren't just editing quirks, they were reminders that we weren't getting the full story. What makes this all so powerful is that the editing didn't just shape the show, it shaped the family's reality. Once something airs, it becomes part of the public narrative. If Moriah is shown as rebellious, that sticks. If Olivia is framed as controlling, that sticks. If Lydia is portrayed only as obedient, that sticks. The editing didn't just influence viewers, it influenced how the Plaths were seen by the world, and even how they were seen by each other. For Lydia, the hardest part wasn't just that her words were left out. It was that the truth she wanted to share, the pain, the faith, the heartbreak, was overshadowed by a version of the story that wasn't complete. And once it aired, there was no way to take it back. That's the hidden cost of reality TV. The Plath family gave us their lives, but we only got the edited version. And in that gap between reality and television, trust was broken, not just inside the family, but between the family and the audience watching at home. When everything else crumbles, the trust, the family unity, the picture-perfect image, what do you hold on to? For Lydia Plath, the answer has always been faith. And she's not alone in that. Jinger Duggar from her own very public family said something similar on her podcast, that the spotlight doesn't just change your life, it reveals who you really are. In their world, faith isn't just a belief system, it's the filter through which every heartbreak and betrayal is processed. Lydia's storyline on Welcome to Plathville has always been tethered to her faith. From the earliest episodes, she was portrayed as the obedient daughter, the one who stayed home, prayed in her closet, and remained loyal to Kim and Barry's strict way of life. For many viewers, she symbolized the glue holding the family together. While Ethan drifted, Moriah rebelled, Micah sought independence, and Olivia set boundaries, Lydia prayed. She prayed for reconciliation, she prayed for healing, she prayed for unity. But what happens when the prayers don't seem to work? When the family you're praying for continues to splinter in front of you? That's where Lydia's faith became not just a habit, but a coping mechanism. On screen, we saw her tears in that tiny prayer closet. We saw her kneel, whispering words that most of us never fully heard because the editing gave us fragments. Yet even those fragments showed a girl trying to carry a weight no one her age should have to carry. The hope of holding her entire family together through prayer alone. Jinger Duggar echoed that same theme when she reflected on how television and fame pulled back the curtain on her own family's struggles. She said that when the masks drop, when people show sides of themselves you never expected, you're left with the question of what's truly inside their hearts. And for both Jinger and Lydia, that answer comes back to faith. If betrayal strips everything else away, what's left is the core of who you are. Faith for Lydia meant interpreting the fractures as a test. Not just a test of her family's unity, but of her personal resilience. She admitted that it hurt to see people she trusted show sides she didn't expect, but she also framed it as a painful truth God allowed her to see. That perspective gave her strength, but it also revealed just how much she depended on belief to survive the chaos. Think back to the way Kim and Barry built their household. Church-centered identity wasn't just part of the Plath family, it was the foundation. They sang hymns together, avoided secular influences, lived on a farm that was meant to keep them away from worldly corruption. From the outside, it looked like purity and devotion. But inside, that same strict faith often became a dividing line. Moriah chafed under it, Ethan and Olivia questioned it, Micah rejected it, and even Lydia, though she stayed devoted, showed glimpses of sadness that it didn't heal the wounds the way she hoped. Episodes often highlighted this contrast. While Moriah used her music and independence as her outlet, Lydia returned again and again to her prayer closet. Producers framed those scenes as touching, almost idyllic, but viewers could see the loneliness in her eyes. Faith was her lifeline, but it was also her isolation. Instead of joining her siblings in rebellion or open confrontation, she shouldered the burden quietly, trusting that God would bring reconciliation in His time. And yet the question remained, did that faith hold the family together, or did it mask deeper fractures? On one hand, it gave Lydia hope when everything seemed hopeless. On the other, it sometimes kept her from speaking the harder truths out loud, because she trusted that prayer alone would fix what was broken. Fans watching couldn't help but wonder, was Lydia's devotion protecting her, or was it preventing her from seeing just how far gone the family already was? Jinger's reflections give us context here. She spoke about how painful it is when faith is used as a shield, when people put on a spiritual mask that hides their real character. In her own life, she saw that the spotlight didn't create dysfunction, it exposed it. Lydia seemed to feel the same. Her faith wasn't about hiding those fractures, but about enduring them. She didn't deny that the pain was real. She just chose to interpret it through the lens of belief, seeing betrayal as a test of character rather than just cruelty. And that's what made Lydia's story so compelling to viewers. She wasn't just the obedient daughter. She was the daughter trying to reconcile her faith with the reality of a family that didn't match the ideals she'd been taught to cherish. She believed love and prayer could heal everything, but she was also learning that sometimes people choose paths you can't pray them back from. That heartbreak was written all over her face in those quiet moments, the editors allowed to slip through. Faith in the end became both the comfort and the conflict. It gave Lydia a way to process betrayal, but it also kept her tethered to a vision of family unity that may never come back. And it raised the bigger question for all the Plath children, would their parents' church-centered identity ultimately bring them closer to each other, or push them further apart? For Ethan, Olivia, Moriah, and Micah, the answer was clear. They had to find their own way outside of it. For Lydia, the answer was more complicated. She chose to keep faith at the center, even if it meant carrying pain the others had put down. And that choice revealed her character. Betrayal didn't harden her. Fame didn't turn her bitter. Instead, she filtered everything through the one thing she could still trust: her belief that God saw her, even when her family didn't. That's why Lydia's faith is more than just a storyline. It's the lens that explained every tear, every prayer, every whispered confession that viewers only partly heard. And it's the reminder that for her, faith wasn't about escaping betrayal, it was about surviving it. When we step back and look at everything the Plath family has gone through, one thing becomes painfully clear. Reality TV didn't cause their fractures, but it absolutely revealed them. What started as a show about a unique faith-based family in Georgia quickly evolved into a mirror, one that reflected both the beauty and the brokenness of their relationships. And once that mirror was placed in front of them, the world got a glimpse of truths that might otherwise have stayed hidden behind closed doors. Think about it. The Plaths were presented as a family rooted in devotion, simplicity, and unity. They sang together, prayed together, and built their lives around shared rules meant to set them apart from the world. On the surface, it was picture perfect. But when the spotlight hit, when we watched Ethan struggle with loyalty to Olivia versus his parents, when we saw Moriah cry out for freedom, when Micah quietly slipped away to chase independence, and when Lydia admitted how painful it was to realize who she couldn't trust anymore, suddenly the cracks became undeniable. This is what reality TV does best, and worst all at the same time. It pulls back the curtain. It strips away the polished image, but it also edits, frames, and cuts those moments in ways that heighten the drama while sometimes minimizing the humanity. And yet, even through all the editing, what slipped through was raw enough to shake viewers. Betrayal, mistrust, disappointment, and the harsh reality that even the closest families can unravel when faced with too much pressure. Lydia's words, in particular, linger like an echo. She wasn't the rebel, she wasn't the fighter, she was the one who stayed obedient, the one who prayed, the one who tried to be the glue. And yet, even she admitted to feeling blindsided, realizing that people she thought she could always count on were not as dependable as she believed. That sentiment resonates far beyond the Plathville storyline. Anyone who has ever felt let down by someone they trusted, whether it was family, a friend, or a mentor, understands the sting she was describing. And that's why this story cuts so deeply. It's not just about the Plaths, it's about all of us. It forces us to ask uncomfortable questions. How much do we really know the people closest to us? Do we only see the version they want us to see, the polished, edited version? And when the truth comes out, when pressure and conflict expose something different, what do we do with that pain? In the end, the Plaths became more than just a TLC family. They became a cautionary tale. Not because they failed, but because they showed us the cost of presenting perfection to the world while struggling with imperfection behind the scenes. Reality TV simply turned the private battles into public ones. And once those masks were stripped away, what was left was messy, human, and deeply relatable. So as we close this chapter today, I want to leave you with the same question that's been running through my own mind. Was this the real truth finally coming out, or was it just TV exaggeration designed to make us lean in closer? Maybe it's both. Maybe the cameras only showed us fragments, but those fragments were real enough to expose wounds that couldn't be hidden forever. And now, I want to hear from you. Do you think the Plath story was manipulated for ratings, or do you think reality TV simply gave us a front row seat to fractures that were always there? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one, and your insights fuel these conversations. If you connected with today's breakdown, don't forget to hit that like button. It truly helps push this story out to more viewers. Subscribe to Reality Scandals Daily so you never miss another deep dive into the hidden truths behind your favorite shows. And if you know someone who's been following Welcome to Plathville, share this video with them, because trust me, this is a conversation worth having. At the end of the day, families are complicated. Trust is fragile. And sometimes the brightest spotlight doesn't just illuminate, it burns away the masks. The Plath story may have unfolded on national television, but the lessons it reveals about betrayal, loyalty, and truth are ones we can all recognize. Until next time, stay curious, stay questioning, and remember, behind every perfect reality family, there's always another story waiting to be told.